Okay, she says she's good. All right. So yeah. So we can start today. Today's class, we are going to be going into something called asynchronous JavaScript. So a little heads up, today's class is going to be a bit more technical, and I won't like to use the word hard, but it's going to be something that is going to you really need to pay attention to and like follow along very well. If not, it is very easy for you to get lost in it. So I'm going to try and explain it to the best I can, and if there's any questions, you can always ask me. So as I said today, we are going to be looking at asynchronous JavaScript. Let me share my screen. And everyone see my screen. Yeah.
I'm not seeing your screen. Oh.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
But Ruben is saying this my screen. I think Rufai to be seeing my screen.
All I'm seeing is just your. Okay, I can see it now.
Oh, yeah, now. Mhm. So um, um yes. So as I said today, we are going to be looking at asynchronous JavaScript. This is how you spell it. Asynchronous. Let me use my okay. Asynchronous JavaScript. Can everyone see what I'm typing perfectly? So what is asynchronous JavaScript? So normally the way JavaScript runs is that it runs line by line, line by line. So for example, to show you how it runs line by line, let's say console.log hello, hey, then we console.log again, hi. This first line is executed before the second line, so it goes line by line. So if you go to our browser and we come here, you see that no matter how much we refresh, it's always going to be line by line. That's how JavaScript works. JavaScript is synchronous by nature, which means it goes line by line. It waits for one um one line to execute before going to the next line. That is what synchronous JavaScript does. And but the problem with synchronous JavaScript is that when there are long running operations, the code is being blocked. For let me give you an example. So, for example, assuming we have something like alerts like this, and let's say we alert welcome to our page like this, and I refresh it like this. You notice that we have this alert window up here, but we don't have anything console.log here because this current alert is blocking the other items from being rendered. Do you guys understand? So it can only continue when we click on OK. So you see, once we clicked on OK, we have our console.log. This is because of synchronous JavaScript. So whenever you have long running operations or operations that happen in the background, it usually blocks other code from being executed. That is what synchronous. That's the problem with synchronous JavaScript. But it's the way that we can use JavaScript in an asynchronous manner. Asynchronous. And the goal of asynchronous JavaScript basically is to deal with long running tasks that run in the background. The most commonly used task is maybe fetching data from remote servers, fetching data from remote servers. And in asynchronous JavaScript, code is executed after a task that runs in the background finishes. That is how asynchronous JavaScript works. So So yeah, so does anybody have any question what I've said so far?
Yeah, you mentioned something just now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said code is executed after a task is what?
He said okay, code is executed after a task that runs in the background finishes.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So another keyword that we're going to be looking at is Ajax, like this. Ajax. So what is Ajax? The full meaning of Ajax is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Asynchron, asynchronous JavaScript and XML, right? Ajax allows us to communicate with remote web servers in an asynchronous way. You remember when I said that the most commonly used background task is when you are fetching data from a web server. So Ajax helps us to communicate with remote servers in an asynchronous way. With Ajax calls, we can request data from web servers dynamically. So I've been seeing web servers request data since. So, but what is that? What is what are servers? So basically, servers are computers that store information and data. You get me? We also have what we call clients. What is clients? Clients are basically computers that you interact with. Like my laptop now can be a client. You get me? So the way fetching data works is that my client now, which is my computer, I will send a request for a particular data, right? I'll send that request to the web server. Then the server will receive that request and now return and it will receive a request, then return a response with the data that I asked for. That is how communication between client and server works. It's basically like me asking Ruben now, okay, Ruben, um, Ruben, what is your name? So I'm sending a request to Ruben, and that request I'm requesting for Ruben's name, right? Ruben will now receive that request, then send me the response. He'll say, "My name is Ruben." So that is the data being returned. That is how it works. That's how communication between clients, which is the browser, and web server works. So the client sends a request, then the web server reads that request and sends back a response. That is how it works. So I don't know if there's any question regarding that. Does anybody have any question? Okay, so okay, Ubed has a question.
Okay, yeah, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, my question is okay, let's say that you build a project and deploy it on the internet. So
You saw
if
what?
someone, let's say that you do something
Yeah.
and deploy it on internet and someone else uses it, or let's say up to 100 people use it, can we call all of them clients or the developer that requests the task the client? Do you understand my question?
You're acting like if if I create an application and I put it on the internet and
Yes.
people use it, so which
Yes,
one is
you
the
are saying maybe like when they log in, kind of to query the data from the web server. Are
yeah.
they also clients or is it only the programmer that is the client?
Okay. A client basically is basically your browser. You get me? So if I go to maybe www www.netflix, right? Somebody has created Netflix and put it online, right? Me accessing this website, that means I'm sending a request to the server. Then the server sends me back, it sends me back the Netflix. You get me? So this is Netflix. So they've sent it back to me. Do you understand? So if you access any web page on your browser, you're automatically a client. Is that clear?
Yeah, that's it. Clear.
Hmm?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it. Clear. I understand now.
yeah. Then what people do is that most people create for their applications, they can create a server for their application. So so those servers now, so those servers can so most people create when maybe you are creating an application now. Netflix can create their own server. Their own server can have data concerning their application, which is Netflix. You understand? So that is how it works. That's how the internet works. It's basically request for data and sending back data. That's how it works. So I don't exactly. Okay. Mhm. So now the next thing we're going to be talking about is APIs. What are APIs? API. So an API is the meaning of API is application programming interface, which is a piece of software that can be used by other pieces of software in order to allow communications to talk to each other. That's what an API is. So let me try and break it down for you. So you know how we said client and web servers? There's something called an API that we can make use of. You know, we are sending requests. We're making use of something to send a request, and we make use of APIs to send a request to the server. Then that API is what collects the API collects the response of that server and brings it back to our browser. That is how APIs work. So you can do it. So you can liken it to when you go to a restaurant, right? So you went to a restaurant, a fancy restaurant, and you are sitting down in your table, right? So normally, what did you go to the restaurant to do? You went to go and eat food. You get me? So what typically happens is that a waiter comes with a menu, right? What do you want? What do you want to eat? You say, "Oh, I want this, I want this, I want that." Right? That waiter then carries what you want, carries your request, takes it to the back, to the kitchen at the back. Oh, says that this person, this so table wants this, that. Then the kitchen now arranges it for you, gives it back to the waiter. Then the waiter carries your food and brings it back to your table. You guys understand that? So you see, so you can say that you on your table, you can be regarded as the client. Then the kitchen can be your server. So you are requesting for food from the server. So then the waiters are like your API. They are the ones that carry your request to the kitchen, which is food, and brings back the response back. So that is how it works. That's how you can imagine APIs to work. So do you guys is that clear? Is it clear? Okay. So since that is clear, that is how APIs work. Then data gotten from APIs are usually used to be in XML format. That's why we have this JavaScript and XML, which is a data format. But now we don't get data in XML format. Rather, we get it in JSON format. What is JSON? JSON format is basically a JavaScript object that is converted to a string. And why are we even using JSON in the first place? JSON, we use JSON because it is easy to send across the web and easy to use in JavaScript. Let me show you how JSON looks like. So we can have like const JSON is equal to, so it's basically an object, but the only thing is that everything is a string, both the key and values, age 21, name, Oshioke, um, state, Edo, um, birthday, 19 February. You get me? So this is how a JSON looks. Is the only difference between JSON and okay, somebody has a question. Mohammed. Mohammed, you have a question? Okay. I think maybe he pressed it by mistake. So we can continue. So the difference between a JSON and an object is that in JSONs, everything is a string. It's just it's like a stringified object, basically. That's what JSONs are. So this is the way data comes using an API. It does not come in XML format, but in JSON format. Then what's the next thing we are going to be doing? So now we can go to the programming aspect. So now I'm going to be showing you like it's the way we used to fetch data before. So I'm going to show you the old way of doing it, then the newer ways of fetching data. So the first way we are going to be looking at is that we're going to be looking at the XML HTTP response example. So let us fetching data using XML HTTP request like this. So for this for this for this class, we're going to be making use of this API. So I'm going to send it to the chat now so you guys can look at it. Then also this is the API link. Okay. So so for this API basically helps us to fetch countries, like country data based on the country that we pass in. So you can read the documentation. So Rufai has a question.
No, can you please pin this thing, the message you just sent, please?
Can I what?
Pin it, pin it.
Okay, I can pin it on the chat. Okay. Mm, okay. Okay, I've pinned it. So now in this API, you say rest countries project. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So it helps us to get country information and country data, such as the name, the flag, currencies, languages, etc., population, and all. So we have things called API endpoints. API endpoints are basically the link that we can use to fetch the data, right? Then we have various ways in which we can search for countries. So first of all, we can use this link to get all the country data, all the countries in the world. We can use this link to get all their data. And let me show you how the data looks. This link like this API endpoint, we can literally just copy it and go to our browser and paste it in. Okay, they've actually changed their link. That's why I sent you guys a new link. So this is I think I'm coming. Okay. Country/all. I'm coming. All. I think there's a problem with the API. So I'll look at that later. Why you cannot fetch all. But the ones that we're going to be looking at is how to fetch it by the name of the country. So in that link that I sent you, you can do country. Country/Nigeria, for example. Nigeria. It's not working. Hmm. I know why. Sorry. I didn't do it well. Country slash name. Sorry. Nigeria. So you see that we have when we fetch Nigeria, this is the information we get about Nigeria. So you can see how it comes as a JSON, as I've said before. So you see, we have the alpha code. Oh, let me just increase so you guys can see it. We have the area, we have the border, the bordering countries, we have the calling code, the capital, the currencies, the demonym, the whether it is an independent country or not. We have the flag, we have the latitude and longitude, we have the name, the native name, population, region, and so on. So you can see the information we have about Nigeria. We also have USC. If you search for USC, let's see what we can see. We have USC. We have the borders, the calling code, the capital, and so on. So this is how data comes. So we are fetching data. We are fetching data using these particular endpoints in asynchronous. I'm not even doing it in JavaScript, but this is how we fetch data. So how can we fetch this data in our code? That is where asynchronous JavaScript comes into play. So we're going to be using this method for fetching data. We're going to be using the XML HTTP request method for fetching data, right? So how does that work? So the way that works is that you're first going to send a request. You're going to define a request. So let's say const request is equal to, we're going to say new XML HTTP request. So this is the first step. The first step in using this particular method. The first step is that we're going to define a request or initialize a request. Initialize a request. This is the first thing that we're going to do. The next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to open we're not going to open that request. Open the request like this. So with time, as you practice, you're going to get used to these steps. So just like follow me. So we're going to open the request. And what does opening mean? In this opening, this is where we're going to define the type of request that we're going to send and the endpoints that we're hoping to make use of. And in this case, there are different types of requests that we can send to an API. So let me just talk about that. Types of requests in asynchronous JavaScript. Number one, we have the get request. So this is what we are doing. Get request is basically us fetching data from the server. That's what the get request does. Another one we have is post request. Post request is used for sending data to the server. That means, for example, let's say we have an application where we are registering students. Maybe you have a secondary school and you want to register a new student. So that means you want to update your database to include these new students in your database, right? So you have to send, whenever the student is registering, you are sending a post request to say that, oh, update the student database to include these students. In that kind of instance, you're going to be sending a post request. Then the next thing you're going to do is the put request. It's put request and patch request. Request like this. So put and patch are like they are similar, but not the same. So in put request, this is when we are replacing data. So for example, let's say we have a student now. let's say I'm a student in your secondary school, but the data I imputed was wrong. So you want to so the data I imputed was wrong. So you want to change my whole information. So you want to send a new information about me. You get me? So you are replacing the data, my own data, that Oshioke students. You are replacing with brand new, the correct information. That is what push request means. But what is now patch request? Patch request is when a particular field is wrong. Maybe you just want to edit a part of your data. Maybe in my data now, the age was not correct. So I want to just change only the age. Then we make use of a patch request. The last type of request that we have is the delete request. Is the delete request. This is a request that we use when we want to delete data from our server. So those are the five types of requests that we have in JavaScript. So now for this request, you're going to make use of the get request. So you put it in quotation and capital letters. Then you pass in the URL, the endpoint. So we have the endpoint stored in this variable here, URL. So, but it's not complete. So we have so I'm going to use template literals, URL, um okay, no, URL, then Nigeria, like this, right? So this is so because you guys know template literals now. I mean, you guys know template literals. So that means this is not new. So I'm just appending Nigeria to the back of the link here. So that is basically what I'm doing there. So after opening the request, you need to send the request. Send the request like this. So how do you send the request? So you just do so request dot send like this, and you just call it. You're not passing in anything. Then this request, as it's sending, is going to load. That like the response is going to load. So how do you get the loaded, like after it loads, how do you get the response back? So the way you do it is that you add an event listener to the request to listen for the load event. So load. So this is not new. So this is event handling. So you wait for the load, and you're going to pass in a function like this, right? So so in this load event, you're going to you're going to so after it has loaded, you're going to receive a data here like this. And in this data, we are going to, so the response is this dot response text like this. Then let's say CLG data, right? So when the request has loaded, so I don't know if you guys have talked about this. This just refers to the request. It refers to the request. So whenever the request has been loaded, it's going to have this response text. So we're just going to say data is equals to that, then console.log data. So let's see what it gives us in our browser, in our console. So you see that we have it here, but you see that this is in a this format is a what's it called, is a JSON format. You get me? But we want it in form of an object. It's easier to manipulate because an object is a data type in JavaScript, so it's easy to change from JSON to an object. And the way we do that is by, we'll say, instead of just doing this, there's this method called JSON.parse. JSON.parse like this. This is where we pass it in. So this JSON.parse transforms JSON object transforms JSON to an object. So if you refresh our page, you notice how it takes time to load because it is fetching data. So it does not happen immediately. It does not happen immediately. So so this asynchronous JavaScript now, let me show you a perfect example like this. I want to show you guys something. So you notice how I've moved this here and high after the after we have fetched our data. So we expect that is when the data comes, that's when we want console.log, right? Well, you see, when we refresh, okay, you notice that it still comes up. Okay, I've not saved it. Okay, so you notice that here and high comes before the data comes, and that is not how it's supposed to be, right? That's how you think it's not supposed to be. So that is it. So that is what asynchronous JavaScript does now. This whole operation runs. Remember what I said in the beginning? This whole operation of fetching data runs in the background. And because we are making use of asynchronous JavaScript, since it runs in the background, it's going to continue running the other application, the other code that we have. Then when that operation is done running in the background, it then outputs, it now returns the output for us in our console. That is basically how asynchronous JavaScript works. So this is how we fetch data back then in JavaScript. In the early years of JavaScript, we use this method. So let me go over it again. We're using the XML HTTP request method. So the first thing is that we need to initialize a request where we do new XML HTTP request and call the function. The next thing, we open the request, which is done by request.open. And in this open function, we need to pass in two things: the method that we are using and the endpoints, the API endpoints, which is get and this URL. The next thing we need to do is we need to send the request, which is done using the send method. Then the next thing is that we need to listen for the load events of that request. Listen for load events of the request. That is what we do. That's that's what we are doing here. Then after listening for the load, it's going to have a response text. So we are going to pass, that means we're transforming from JSON to an object. We're going to pass the response text and console.log it. So this is how we fetch data using the XML HTTP request. So does anybody have any question? So you see, it comes in an array. Okay, Rufai has a question.
Yeah, sorry, can you please go back to your code? I want to say something. And can you please scroll up a little?
Okay.
No. After like yeah, and this const URL HTTP this thing. Does it mean this thing has to be there before we see our output, all those things? This const URL HTTP countries API blah blah blah.
Because you need an endpoint. You need an API endpoint. Remember
Okay.
what I said? I said the
You know,
API.
actually, what happened is that we've seen this one before you started explaining
Okay,
their
okay, okay.
hand. That's why I'm
Oh,
confused.
oh, I was one that just saved it.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So, and I've already sent the link to the
Okay,
chat.
okay.
So, does anybody have any other question? Have you guys spoken about destructuring before? Yes. So you guys have spoken about destructure. So you notice that this is an array, and the array only has one item. So you can easily destructure this data by wrapping this a square bracket. So this destructures it. So if we refresh our page, you see that it comes out as just this object, right? So yeah. So I actually have some HTML and CSS here already so that we can display this information in our browser. So So if you go to our index.html, we have this country. Let me just do it so you guys can just go over it later. So after we've gotten our data, we're going to have a variable called HTML like this. HTML, and it's going to be in template literals, and we paste that in. So we just have this article. First of all, we have an image. Then we need to put the source attributes here. So the source can be gotten from, if you go to your browser, you see that we have a flag. You see that we have a flag attribute in the data that we got, a flag, and this is actually a link to the flag of that particular country. So we can just put um we can put data dot flag like this, data dot flag. The next thing is the country name. So that is going to be, where can we see the name? So country dot name. Sorry, data dot name like this. I'm in the class. So after country dot name, there's also country. So there's the region. If it goes back to the data, there's also a region here. So you do data dot region. So this is just normal template literals that you guys know. We have data dot region. The next thing is the population. So the way so we have, so if you go back, we also have a population here. So population, we have population right here. So we have data dot population. We have data dot population slash 1 million. Then we can put it in a fixed, maybe. So we don't have 0.24567891. We can just we can have it to fixed, to have maybe just one decimal place, if any. The next thing that we have is the language. So if you go back here, you see that we have a languages array. So we're going to typically pick the first one. So we'll do the first one dot name. So the way we do that is we just do data dot languages okay. We have data dot languages at 0 dot name like this. Then for the current, we also have for currencies. In currencies, we also have an array. We pick the first one, then the dot, then we do the dot name. So data of currencies 0 name like this. So how can we render this in our HTML page? So the way we would render it, if you go back here, we have this countries container here. So in this countries container, we basically we said countries container dot. We have this. Have you guys been taught insert adjacent HTML? Insert, okay. So this basically just inserts HTML in your web page. So this countries container is basically this div, right? So we want to insert HTML within this countries div. So we do countries.insert adjacent HTML. So it's a method that we can, it's part of DOM manipulation, adjacent HTML. And that takes in two values. It takes in the coordinates and the HTML. So there's after begin, after end, before begin, before end. So after begin, so after begin is basically, if you go to HTML, after begin, the container begins here. So if you are doing after begin, that means it's going to insert the HTML directly here. That's what the after begin means. Then we also have after end. So what after end does is this is the end of the HTML. It inserts it after the end of the container, right? Then apart from that, we have before begin and before end. So before begin, insert it before the beginning of the container, which is here. Then before end, insert it just before it ends here, which is here. So that is how the insert adjacent HTML works. It basically just helps us to insert HTML at a place that we specify. So we're going to be specifying it before end. Before end like this, and we're going to be inserting our HTML, right? Then we have this transition. Initially, it's set at the opacity of this container is set at 0. That is, if you come here, you see opacity is set at 0. So we need to put it at 1. So it's just easy. We've talked about it. We talked about it last class. Countries container dot style. Countries container dot style dot opacity like this. I want to set it equal to 1. Class. Yeah. So I want to set it to 1. So if we now go back to our browser and we refresh, you see, if we refresh our page now, you see that we have this clean animation here where we have the flag, the name, the region, the population. I think this is supposed to be million. I'm coming, so I'm supposed to put M here. So yeah, the language spoken and the currency. So this is how you can use data fetched from the server to put it in your browser. So does anybody have any question regarding what I just did? Is it clear? Okay. So if there's no question, since we're going to be working more on this, I'm going to let's do some refactoring. So because we're going to be doing more of this, so we don't want to have to be doing copy and paste. So we're going to put this whole the rendering of the HTML. Let's put it in its own new function. So let's call that let's see function display country, or no, render. Let's call it render HTML. And what do we need? We need a country to be passed in. So this is how you work in JavaScript, because you'll be doing a lot of refactoring so that you don't have to repeat. You don't repeat code. You don't repeat code. So we're going to be passing in the country. So the way that will work, so we'll copy this whole code that we have here, like this. Let's cut it, and we'll paste it here, right? So country, or let's call it data, so we don't have to rename everything here. Data, like this. We can actually call it country, and I don't know. Mm, let's just call it data. So render HTML with the data. So then inside here we'll just call that function render HTML, and we pass in data here. So if you go back, see whether everything works. So you see it still works as normal. So we have this clean code now that has everything. So yeah, so are we clear about this? About using the XML HTTP method? Does anybody have any question? Is there any question? Refine
Yes, sir. Can you please just try and go over it again a little bit, please?
the XML.
Yes.
Okay. So as I
And
was Mhm.
to fetch this in the HTML too from
The HTML.
yes,
Okay.
HTML to this thing.
Okay. So let me actually okay. So the first thing I said was that for us to make use of the XML HTTP request to request for data from servers, the first thing we need to do is that we need to initialize a request, and this is how we do it. We say request is equal to
I understand all this one. Just like the HTML.
Okay,
How
the
you add
HTML.
the HTML here? How you add the HTML to this? Maybe you should
Okay,
try and delete all this function of HTML first, and then you now put it there again. So that's what I'm calling
I should try
from.
and delete what?
No, as in I'm talking about this HTML. This
Okay.
HTML there. So
Uh,
it's that one I don't get very well.
okay. So the reason why we are doing this is that there are times where, based on the data you receive from your server, you want to use that data to populate your front end or your browser. You get me? So it's in the same way. Maybe you have like you go on Twitter now. You know, if you go on Twitter, there's going to be a loading spinner because it's trying to fetch your data. You get me? When it now gets your data, it's not going to create a front end for you. That is basically what happens. That's what we are trying to do here. So we're basically saying that whenever we have gotten our data, we want to display this card here. You get me? And the way we'll do it is that if normally before I already have a HTML, I have the card here. You get me? But this card is like fixed. So let me show you what I mean. Let me so if I uncomment this now, right? And I refresh, you see that normally I already have this card here before the Nigeria thing came up. But this country does not make sense. But we only want to make use of cards when we have data from a country that we've selected. You get me? So that's why this is commented out for us to know. Normally if you're developing if you are developing this on your own, the way it works is that you don't even have anything inside here. You just have this. You get me? So whenever you now fetch the country, you want the data to be put inside this container. That is basically what we're doing, right? So so that's what we're so that is what we were doing. I'm coming. Okay. So yes. So now that we have gotten the data here and we've passed it, we want to render it. So that is why we have this. So we now create a HTML for that particular card. You get me? So in that card now, we have an image tag, right? We want to now use the flag attribute of the data. That's where we now, all this information, we're getting this information from the data that was returned to us from the server. You get me? So that's basically what we do all around here. We make use of template literal. You must see template literal now. So after we've gotten our HTML, we want to now insert that HTML into our page. You get me? That's where we now say we want to insert it within the country's container. So we say country's container that we've selected here using query selector dot insert adjacent HTML. We are inserting it before the end of the container, and this is what we are going to be inserting. That's all. The next thing that we want to change the opacity using the style attributes to 1. That is all. To provide you, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does anybody have any other question? Is it another question? So if there's no other question, we can move on to the next aspect, which is so the next aspect is that what is the downside of having this particular of using this particular method? So one of the downsides of using this particular method is called callback hell. Callback hell. So let me show you how that works. So it's something called callback hell, right? So for example, what if we want to render, for example, in this data that we have something called borders. We have Benin Republic and the rest, Cameroon, and so on and so on. What if immediately after we fetch Nigeria, we want to fetch the information of Benin Republic? We want to fetch the information of the first neighboring country. How does that work? So that means the fetching of this second country is dependent on the first one. So to do that, the way we'll do it is we are going to now start a new XML request. So we're going to say within here, we'll still come here and we'll still do, let's call this request2 dot. So we're going to just do this. I'm still going to do the same process. So there's a way we can use this. Is a way that we can fetch. We can fetch using sorry. We're going to be fetching using the acronym of the country. And the way to do that is that if you go back to we have code. You can use the code to fetch. How does that work? Okay. We can use the code to fetch. So instead of Nigeria here, we're going to have data dot borders dot. We have data dot borders, and it's the first one, which is 0, like this. Then let's console.log. So now after we've opened, so we've initialized or started a new request. So the same method, we've opened it and we are sending. Now we need to wait for this request2 to load again. So we need to now do request2 dot add event listener dot. So you're listening. Okay, someone has a question. Tally.
Hello. It's not actually a question. I just dropped the attendance link on the comment section, so you guys should do well to sign in.
Okay.
Okay, please. I don't know if you can help me pin the attendance to the comment section.
Okay. I can't pin it unless
Yeah, just copy and repaste it, then you'll be able to pin it.
I pinned it.
Thank you.
Hmm. So we are going to load it again. Then we just still the same process. But I just want to show you guys something. So let's call this data two. I want to see whether this works. Okay, perfect. So are you guys seeing how it happened? The first Nigeria loaded, the Benin Republic loaded. So the second one only starts loading when the first one has been loaded completely. So this is what we have. So just imagine that we cannot really see the callback here now. So for example, let us say we want to do this whole process again. So we want to also get the border of Benin Republic. Let's check the borders. It has this BFA. I'm not sure what that is. So let's let's do this whole process again.
That's Burkina Faso.
Yeah, Burkina Faso. So um okay, yeah. So now we're going to have request three, request three, request three, like this. Data three, right? So I don't know if you can notice this thing. You can't really notice it right now because you see how we are having nested objects, and over time we are going to have this triangle by this side. We have this triangle like this. We have this triangle. Let me show you how the triangle looks normally. So let's say we have a set timeout. So set timeout, we have this. Let's say we have after it should run after 1 second. You will say console.log 1 second pass, right? Then inside here we now have another set timeout again. So after this thing, then we have another set timeout 3. Then we have another set timeout like this. So can you see? We have another one like this, 5, like this, 6. So can you see how? So this is basically how we. So this is basically how it works. This is how callback here works. So by using this method, we eventually leads us to callback here. So this is how it looks. You see there it forms this triangle like this. This is the reason why using this XML HTTP request method is not really in vogue right now. People don't really use it like that. So I don't know if you guys can see it. Do you guys understand?
It's getting confused.
What? What do you say?
The part you said is the first time out, I think I'm
I didn't hear
confused.
you.
I said the part you did set time out, I'm confused.
Okay.
You use multiple set time out, that's why I'm confused.
No, like I'm just trying to illustrate to you how it works.
Okay.
How you can see, like how you can identify callback here. Ruben has the question.
So please, can I do a little recap on it?
What?
Guys, check the attendance. It's working now. I just updated it.
So somebody have a question.
I said, please, can I do a little recap on it? It's a bit confusing.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that the reason why people don't use this XML HTTP request is because whenever you have nested requests, it always leads to callback hell, where you have this triangle, this left-hand side triangle in your code. For example, now if you look at this part now, it's very small, but you can notice how there's a like a triangle here like this, because you keep nesting and nesting. So imagine if you have like 20 requests, you keep on nesting and nesting and nesting, and it's going to have this awkward shape. That is the reason why we don't use XML HTTP requests. So I'm trying to show you how it looks like profoundly when you use it in set timeout. So this is how it would look. This is how this function could look over time when you have multiple nested requests. It will form this V shape, this greater than this greater than sign here like this. So that is what I was trying to show you guys. So I'm going to be showing you another method of sending requests, a more modern method that handles this callback hell better for us. So I don't know, does anybody have any other question regarding the XML HTTP? If I
Yes, sir. Maybe by the end of the class, can you help us maybe try and push the code to maybe GitHub so that we can try and review it?
okay.
Thank you.
So Jethro,
Yeah. So this XML HTTP request is not a contemporary method of fetching data. Is that what you mean?
like contemporary,
Like it's not the
like
modern way of fetching
yeah, it's
data.
not the it's not the modern way.
Okay.
Uh, so yeah. So the next thing that we're going to do now, we're going to be talking about something called promises. Promises in JavaScript. So using promises is the latest way of fetching data. What is a promise? First of all, so a promise is a placeholder for a future result of an asynchronous operation or a container for a future value. That is basically what a promise is. Promises help us to avoid nesting callbacks. So the actual word for this thing is called a callback. So any function, this function here, this function, so this function here, after the event listener, is called a callback function. Callback. The same thing, the same function you have here is called a callback function. So it helps us from nesting callback functions by chaining promises, and also helps us to avoid callback hell. That is the use of, that is why we use promises. That's why we use promises. So I think let us remove this request 3. Let me show you guys something. So we have this neighboring country. We have this neighboring country. So let's try and render data 2 like this. So if we come back, so you see that these are the two countries that we have. So this is Nigeria, and this is the first neighbor of Nigeria. So promises. So the way promises work is that if you send a request, to a server, it's going to be, the request is going to return, you're going to return a promise. Oh, I promise to give you this value when a response comes back. That is basically how promises work. And promises have a life cycle. They have a life cycle. So promises, they move from um, pending to settled. They move from pending to settled. Then Um, and while it is settled, it can either be fulfilled or rejected, like this. Fulfilled or rejected. So when it is pending, this is before the future value is available. That means when the request is just sent. Then before it is being settled, that is when the asynchronous operation is performed. That is when the request is being sent and is waiting for the response. That is the process of sending. This arrow is the process of sending the request. Then it now reaches a state called settled. So this is when the asynchronous task has been completed. So within this settled, it can either be fulfilled or rejected. So fulfilled means that there has been success and the value is now available. But rejected means that an error happened. Maybe there was no internet or the data is not available. That is what rejected means. So and we can handle these various phases in our application. So now let us work with that. So the way we can make use of promises. So I'm going to console.log everything that we have here. So I can show you what's in okay. So the way it works is that you use the fetch keyword like this. In this fetch keyword, you pass in the URL that you want to fetch from. So in this case is URL then Nigeria, right? Fetch. So this fetch keyword automatically returns a promise, right? It returns a promise. So the way you can catch a promise is that you use the .then method like this. And this .then contains a response. So you have a callback here. So this response now, this response comes in the form of a JSON. So you want to convert it to an object. So you do res.json, like you call the JSON method like this. This is also an asynchronous method which returns a promise. Then to catch the promise of this one, you also use another .then like this. This .then has a data. And this is where you do console.log data like this. So this is how, so you can see all those things that we did, all those lines of code, you can just do it easily like this. So if you go back to our browser and we refetch, you see that our data comes out like this. Very simple. So can you guys see how promises make our fetching of data more easier with just 3 lines of code? So if we want to now display we just do render we do render HTML, then we see data, the first data like this. And if we go back like this, you see that our application works perfectly. So let me go over it again. So the way the fetch works is that the first thing you are going to do, you are going to call the fetch method. And within the fetch method, you are going to pass in your endpoints. Normally, you can also pass in the okay. So yeah, you pass in your endpoints like this. After passing the endpoint, this fetch returns a promise, which I said is a future value. So when it returns that promise, in order to catch that promise when it has been settled, you use the .then method. Then the .then method, you're now going to transform it to JSON, which also returns a promise, right? After that returns a promise, you then catch that promise again with data. Then you console.log data and you render the HTML. Do you guys understand? Does anybody have any question? Does anybody have any question? Is it clear? Okay. So if it's clear, we can move to the next. We can move to the next thing, which is
Yes, sir. Someone is saying you should recap.
I should recap.
Someone is
Okay.
saying you should recap, yeah, in
Okay.
the comment section.
So I'm saying that we're making use of promises now to handle requests. So the way promises work is that, okay, let me show you what a promise is basically. So if you remove this now, let's say const promise like this. Then let's say CLG promise. So if you go back to our browser and we refresh, you see that we have this promise here, and this promise is pending. Okay, let me refresh and show you guys something quick. So yeah, so this promise is pending initially. Then I'm coming. Okay, so this promise is pending. So this is the future. It's promising us a future value when everything has been resolved. So in order to get the future value of this promise, that's when you now use the .then method like this. .then, right? In this .then now has a response. Then you have a callback here that you can use an arrow function for. So you do res. So let's console.log CLG res like this and see what it gives us. So here you see so this is the response that we get, but we need to pass this response to get the actual data of the response. So we're not actually getting the data here. We have this body which is a readable stream, So we want to now pass it so that we can get the actual data that we are looking for. That is why instead of console or logging it, we perform res.json like this. So this also returns a promise. So if you come, it also returns a promise. So if you console log, you see that we also have another promise here, right? We have another promise. So this promise now, we see the promise results. This is the results that it gives us. So how do we get the data of this promise? The way we get it is that we will consume that promise by using .then again. .then, we have the data, then we just console.log data. So that is how it works. So this whole process is called consuming. This is called consuming a promise. This is how you consume a promise. Okay. So yeah. So this is how it works. So the person that asked the question, that asked me to recap, is it clear? Is it clear, class? Okay. So the next thing now we're going to be talking about is how to chain chain a promise. You know, in the last one, now we're looking for how to get the neighboring country data. So we call it chaining. We can chain promises together. And how does that work? The way that will work is that within this data here like this, consists of log data, right? Within this data, we can then within this data we can return a promise. We can return a promise, and how do we do that? The way we return a promise is that we call fetch again here. So we call fetch, then we call it with the URL, then data dot sorry data dot borders 0. Like I think that's how we did it now. Data dot borders 0. So this returns a promise. How can we consume this promise within this then? You can then add another then here like this. So then here we have response. Then we have response. So we have res.json again, which returns another promise. Then we do then again data. Then we do console.log data. So first of all, let us render the HTML of this data like this. I think we should also render it here too. And render HTML data. I think, yeah. So if you go back to our browser, refresh, so you see how the data comes. So you see how it is much, much easier for us. So this is how you can chain promises together. So I know it's a bit complex, but you just need to just look at it, then try it out. As you do it more often, you then understand the whole concept and how to continue using it going forward. So is there any question? So if you are still having issues with it, I suggest that maybe you could go on YouTube, or you could go on YouTube or ChatGPT. You can the way it will work. Let's ask ChatGPT. Let me show you guys how to use ChatGPT for all these type of things. So the way you could use ChatGPT is okay. Obed has a question. Explain this piece of code to me as if I were a 5-year-old. So, okay. Explain promises. Yeah, now. So, let's read what Obed, Obed, do you want to ask a question before we go through this?
Yes, I think I have a question.
Okay, what is the question?
So I go back to your code.
Okay.
So from that line 103,
Yeah.
I think. So that's when you will return a new URL for data. So instead of using a new page, I think that border is the part of the data we will return that.
Uh,
So let's kind of log because this thing I'm kind of little bit confused. Let's kind of log the data zero dot border to know if it will actually return this value
hmm.
before the fence. That's yeah.
I really don't. I can't really hear you.
Okay. I said can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I said that like let's try to log the data uh, index one dot border. Let's see if we return the neighboring country instead of fetching another new URL, instead of using another fetch, because this another fetch is a kind of conflict. Since the border is part of data that we fetch at the first fetch, understand?
Yeah.
So why can't we use the kind of why can't we just use the indexing and find the border instead of fetching a new one again?
So you're asking us whether we can use another API to fetch the
Yes,
border.
what I mean is the data dot border is part of the data we fetched at the first time.
Yeah.
Yes. So the thing is, why can't we just access it directly without fetching a new one? You get?
Okay. The reason is because let's look at how the data comes. If you notice, if you open this up like this, so if you see border here, if you see border, the border only returns the name of the country, the acronym of the country, but it does not return all the other data that we need, such as the flag, the name, the region, the population, the language, and the currency. That is why we are refetching it again. You get?
Yeah, I understand. Now. So, you're just fetching the name and adding it to the URL to fetch the entire country data.
Yes. So
Okay, I
so
understand
now
now.
so we pass it so it can either be Ben, CMR, TCD. So if we
Yes.
not if we check if we take the second border, let's say we want the second border, that is this CMR. I think CMR is Cameroon. So if we now come
Yeah,
here now and we refresh, you see that okay. Okay, Cameroon does not have a flag.
let's try another one.
So let's try number two, flag. So hmm. So the flag is the issue now. So we're going to know how to do error handling better. I'm coming. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say number two. Let me just you can do optional like this. So I think since flag is the issue. Else, ah, so I don't know. It's just showing the first one. So I guess it has issues.
So the index of the data is still at 0. Is that not
Yeah.
what is affected?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's how it's supposed to be
Okay.
because it comes as an array now. So
Okay.
this is data. So we want the first item, that is this zero. See zero here. That's why we're using zero. So that is why we are fetching multiple. I don't know if it's clear for you, Obed. So let us read what ChatGPT says.
Yes, I understand now. It's just
Okay,
we are just grabbing the name of the neighboring
okay,
contract and placing it in the URL.
okay. So for ChatGPT now, it says that think of a promise like making a plan with a friend. Let's say you ask your friend if they want to play a game with you, but they have to check with their parents first. They promise to let you know once they find out if they can play or not. Right? Here's how it works. The first thing, you make a promise. When you first ask, they say, I promise to tell you soon. But right now, you don't know if it is a yes or no. So you are waiting for their answer. So it's basically like you saying, let's answer be equal to question mark, question mark. So when they now get back to you, that's when you can either know whether it's true or false. That's what that part says. The next thing now is the waiting time. While they are asking their parents, you are waiting. You are not playing the game yet, but you trust that when they get an answer, they will let you know right away. That is why whenever you are fetching data, you see that there's like a space in between. It does not return immediately. So you are waiting as a period of waiting. The next thing now is getting the result. When they finally come back, if it is a yes, the promise is fulfilled and you can go and play. If no, the promise is rejected and you can't play, but at least you know the answer. You get me? The next thing now, in code, promises are like are like this waiting period. When you say fetch, you are asking for information, and the computer promises to tell you once it has it. So that when you use that fetch keyword, your computer is promising to say, oh, once I get the data that you want, I will let you know. You get that? I will let you know means that it will console.log to the console, right? While it is waiting, if the computer gets the data, a yes, it fulfills the promise. And yes, we can keep going on with our plan. But if there's an error, which is a no, the promise is rejected. And we can handle it by saying, okay, no game today. So in our example with Nigeria, we make a promise to get Nigeria's info. We wait for it to come back. Once it does, we look at Nigeria's info and ask for its neighbor's info with a new promise. You get me? So as we've gotten Nigeria's info, we're not saying, oh, I also want the information of the neighbor. So the computer is also going to give you another promise to say, okay, I'm going to go and fetch the neighbor's info. Wait for me to give you back the information. So that's why it returns a promise. That's what happens here. So we're returning the promise gotten from here after we fetch. Then when it gets back, that's when we now try and resolve it. So then each dot then lets us see what we will do when each promise is fulfilled, step by step until we are done. So what this dot then is saying that, okay, if this promise is fulfilled, that means whether we get fulfilled or rejected. So we're saying if this promise is fulfilled, that means the promise is fulfilled. We want this to happen. We want to use the promise information to do this. That is basically how it works. So that is why promises are great. They let us ask for information, wait, and handle things only when we get the answer. That is all. So does this explanation handle it better? So that is how promises work in JavaScript. So does anybody have any question regarding what we've said? So we've learned what promises are. We've learned how to consume promises. This process of dot then is this dot then is basically how we consume a promise. We consume that promise. Then we also learned how to chain promises together. So this process is called chaining a promise. The next thing we want to look at is how to handle rejected promises. So for example, this fetch Nigeria now has an issue. Maybe there was no network or something happened. How do we, in case, there are two states of a settled promise. It can either be rejected or fulfilled. But right now, the way we are doing it now, we are just assuming that it's always going to be fulfilled every time. We're not accounting for rejections. So the way we do that is every dot then takes in two parameters. It takes in the callback for fulfilled, and it takes back a callback, and it takes in a callback for rejection. So this res greater than equal to res.json is what will happen if the promise is fulfilled. But if it is rejected, we are going to have an error, right? And we want to just console.log error like this. So this is how we handle rejection. The same thing here, like this, and the same thing here, like this, and the same thing here. But if you notice now, we are writing the same error rejection everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. So it's like us repeating ourselves. So there's a more better way of handling errors. And the better way, instead of doing this method, is the better way is that instead of dot then, finally, like at the end of the last dot then, you just do dot catch like this. And dot catch takes an error, then you do console.log error. So what this does is that at any point when you are fetching data, whenever there's an error, it automatically comes to dot catch, and the error is displayed automatically. So that is how it works. So I'm going to show us how we can see this in action. So let's have a button here, like this, button country. So there's already a button there. So we're going to listen for an event on that button. Okay. Rufai has a question.
Yeah. So check your income message. I think someone just dropped the message.
Okay, please, sir, check your HTML. I want to. Oh, please click on your HTML and CSS. I want to verify something. So this is the HTML. Then this is the CSS. CSS is just some basic styling. So let's continue. So I want to put this in a function. So let's say function fetch country and neighbor, like this. Fetch country and neighbor. Then we're going to do all of this. Okay. So fetch country and neighbor. So we have that button.add event listener click, like this. So in this click, we want to perform this fetch country and neighbor. So if you go to our browser and we refresh, okay. So we have this. So if we click on this now, you see that we fetched the data. And I think let me just use render HTML. There's something called, you're supposed to have like a class name here. So let me just change this. We can so we have a class name for neighbors. So anytime there's a neighbor, we should have the class name of neighbor like this. So in this, when we're rendering for the neighbor, you pass in neighbor like this. So that gives it a different appearance. I'm coming. Is that how they spell it? Okay. I didn't spell it correctly. H. Okay. Neighbor like this. Okay, so yeah. So this is so we're talking about how we can catch errors, right? So for example, now let's say if you refresh our page and there's a way we can toggle our network. So this you see this network tab in your console. You see this drop down. You can set it to offline, 3G, 4G, slow 4G, fast 4G, or no throttling. So we can put it at no throttling like this. And if we now if as we put it and we click on this, where am I?
Hello, sir.
I'm hearing you.
Please can you share the link to me? I don't have access to it.
So what?
Access to what you are doing now. This yes.
This what?
What you are doing now, I don't have access to it.
Oh, are you just coming to class?
No, about 30 minutes, sir.
Oh, like you don't have access to the code base.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to send the code base after the class.
Okay.
Mhm. So now so we've set the network to offline. So if I click on this button now, you see that it shows failed to fetch. Fetch failed loading. That means internet disconnected. So this is how you can catch those errors by using this catch method here in your asynchronous JavaScript. So you use the catch method. But what of situations where imagine now, let's say you have a country that is non-existent like this, right? And you come here. Um, okay, let's bring back the network past 4G. If you bring back the network, you see that it's still if you notice at 101, okay, if you notice, so we are making use of a country that does not exist, HTTY, blah blah blah. This is not a real country. So you notice that it still tries to read the properties of flag. That means you can see that it is actually getting to you can see it is getting to this point before it realizes that there's no country like that. But there's a way you can catch all those type of errors from the beginning. The way you do it is that inside here, you can let's console.log rest like this. Console.log, we are console.logging the response. So if we check it like this, and I think let's let's do something first of all. If you notice, right, this dot then rest.json and this, they do the exact same thing. So we can also refactor this into its own function for a cleaner code. So we can have a function called get JSON like this, right? And what do we need? We basically just need I think what do we need? Mhm. 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 I don't think I'm coming. I don't want to get it mixed up. So back to what I was saying. So let's consider log this rest here, this promise. If we come back here and we refresh, you see that this response has a okay or false, a status of 404. What 404 means is not found. So from beginning, it is showing that this response, there's no response for this request that we are making. So the way you could do it is that you could do a simple if block here. You say if it's not okay, what do we want to do? The way we can do it is that we can do it in such a way that we can throw an error directly from here. And the way we'll do that is that we'll just say throw error or throw new error like this. Then you pass in the message of the error. So let's say country not found like this. And we could do the exact same thing here. So if we refresh the page and do this, okay is not defined. So are we using the same? Okay, I know the reason. We're just calling okay. It's supposed to be rest or okay. Rest or okay like this. So you see now we are throwing an error. We have thrown the error. Country not found. So what this throw new error does is that it basically just sends the whole operation down to this catch block. And this error that we have here is the error message that we are passing in here. So we have error.message like this. And you see that the message that we specify is what will happen. So if we click here, you see country not found. So that is basically how we can throw errors and have error handling in using promises. So I don't know if there's any question regarding this. So you can see what I meant by this topic is kind of complex. But if you practice, you're going to get the hang of it. It's not impossible. Does anybody have any question? Rufai, do you have any questions? Rufai? Okay.
I'm good to go, sir.
Okay. So, Jethro, do you have any question? Ubed?
I think when
Okay. So this catch, throw and catch. So it is in a situation when the response is not okay that we can actually use this throw and catch.
Yes. Whenever there's any error at all.
Okay.
Yeah. But this throw method is when you want to throw errors manually yourself. You want to throw normally with the whole request method, if there's any error done while fetching, the computer can actually throw the error itself. The computer will throw the error itself. But in cases where you want to catch those errors yourself personally, this is when you can manually throw those errors. That's what is happening here. So, does anybody have any other question? Does anybody have any question?
No question for now, sir. After because no question. No question.
Okay. So, if that is fine, The next thing I'm going to talk about is dot finally. Apart from dot catch, we also have dot finally. Dot finally is not really used like that. But one instance where I can tell you where finally is used is particularly in situations where finally does not receive anything. So, for example, what finally does is that whether there's an error or not, whether the promise is fulfilled or not, we want to finally do this no matter the outcome. That is what the finally block is for. And a very common use case of dot finally is when, for example, you have a loading spinner. So let's say Twitter. If I go to Twitter now like this, um, so you notice this spinner. Let me try and reduce the network. So let's see, slow 4G. If I refresh this page, you notice that there are some spinners, right? And those spinners now, whether or not, so you see those spinners now, whether or not we were able to fetch my information from Twitter, the spinners vanish. That's an example. So if there's an error when fetching data, you don't expect your spinner to be spinning forever. It's supposed to stop. You get. So that is one example of when you can use the finally. So maybe in the finally, you can now set loading. You can set it to false like this. So this is not the actual syntax, but this is how you can use dot finally in your code. So the next thing that we're going to be, what is the next thing that we're going to be looking at? We're going to be now looking at another way of fetching data apart from promises. Another way we can use it is by using async await. Async await. So async await. So let me comment all this out. So async await is basically when we want to create an asynchronous function. It's basically an asynchronous function, and we transform a regular function to an asynchronous function by simply writing async at the beginning of the function. So this is what transforms a function to an asynchronous function, right? So in this method is actually very easy. You're also going to be using the fetch keyword. So here you just do fetch like this. Then you have the, okay, let me just, so I don't do all this thing. So we have fetch like this. So fetch, fetch returns the promise, right? So, but we need to wait for that fetch to finish executing. So the way you do it is that you do const, let's say rest is like this, right? So for you to make this and wait for the response to come, for the promise to be settled, you just put await like this. Await it. After awaiting it, you want to now convert it to JSON now. You want to .json it to pass it. So you do const data again is equal to await JSON like this. Then you do console.log data. So that is it basically. So if you go back to our browser, if you go back to our page like this, and okay, So yeah, you see that the data has been consumed or logged here. So you see, this is an easier way. This is an easier way of doing asynchronous JavaScript where you use an async function. Use async await. So here now you can just do your render HTML, then data like this. Then you can also come here and still do render HTML, data dots borders like this 0. So if you okay. It is 0. I'm coming. I think um, I don't know why doesn't this work? Okay. Um, okay, I know the reason because it has not fetched it. So that's besides the point. So you see that it renders. So this is a better way of doing. But why is it fetching twice? Okay, it's because I call this here again. Okay, so yes, so for the async and wait is you have normal functions that you create. In order to transform a regular function to an asynchronous function, you just need to insert the async keyword before the function declaration, right? Then within the function, whenever you have something that returns a promise, you need to await the settlement of that promise and store it in a variable. And that is what happens here. We are awaiting the promise returned from this fetch and storing it in this rest variable like this, right? Then this rest.json also returns a promise which we are awaiting for the settlement. Then we store it in this data. Isa,
Sorry, sir. Sorry to
mm,
ask. I've been observing your Visual Studio Code for a while. What's the function of that and JavaScript JS?
was it's just I think it's automatic. It just automatically detects the language that you are typing in.
Okay.
Mm.
So do you have any selection that we can download anything else?
For extensions,
Yes.
um, not really. Just the usual ones for programming, such as Prettier, ESLint,
Yes,
and so on.
yes, I'll have it already, but I saw a lot of JavaScript translators and other stuffs in the extensions.
Okay. Mm, I have some for Tailwind. Then the theme I'm using, they are just some. So the best, maybe if you're looking for extensions, you could just go on YouTube and just search best extensions, VS Code extensions for web development,
Yeah.
basically. So yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Does anybody have any question regarding this async await? Um so who raised his hand? I can't see it. If you raise your hand, just talk. Hello? Does, does anybody have any question with async await? So if there's no question, okay, Jetro says everything is cool. So if there's no question, I know maybe the next thing you'll be thinking about it. So how do you do error handling with async await? So the way you do error handling with async await is that you make use of something called try and catch. So your logic, you're going to put it within a try block, like this try block here. Okay. What's happening? Okay, yeah, so who is Rufai?
Yes, sir. Actually, I think Obed is asking a question, but he said he's in a noisy place, so he has dropped the message.
Okay. Say, but how can we set a timer like when the function is ready? Like I don't really understand this question, Obed. Does anybody understand what he's trying to say? So maybe you could like reframe it, then type it. I'll go back to it. So I was saying, we make use of the try block for error handling. So the try block holds our normal execution. Then we have the try catch, sorry. Then the catch block is what catches our error. So within the catch block, we can do our normal error handling, console.log error dot message like this. So this is how it is. So this is how you can catch errors. And within your try block, you can also throw errors. You can throw an error. So within here, you can also do the same thing that we did, where we said if res dot okay, if there's no res dot okay, you want to throw this error, country not found. So this is how you do error handling in asynchronous JavaScript. So I hope that is clear. So yeah, so this is all for async await. Does anybody have any question regarding this? Okay, Obed. We said like when we have a loader that needs to disappear when the data is ready. So okay. Okay, when you have a loader that needs to disappear, you just use the dot finally. You use the dot finally. So in async await, instead of dot finally, what we have is we have a finally block here like this. Finally, you don't need to set a timer for the finally. You just maybe what you just do is that I think it would have been easier in React to show you this. In the dot finally, you can just say maybe the spinner, maybe you have a spinner selected. You say spinner dot style does display. You can now set it to none like this. So this is something that you can do. So you don't really need to use a timer for it. So the JavaScript already knows how to handle everything. So yeah, does anybody have any other question? Okay. So since there's no question again, so I think we're even we'll be able to cover a lot. So today, what did we cover? We talked about asynchronous JavaScript, Ajax, APIs, how to make XML HTTP requests, and the downside of it. We talked about callbacks and callback hell. Then we spoke about how requests and responses work in the computer. We talked about promises and the fetch API. Then we talked about how to consume promises, how to chain promises together, how to handle rejected promises, how to throw errors manually, and what else did we talk about? We also spoke about async await. Then we talked about how you can do error handling in async await using the try catch method. Then yeah, so that's basically what we've spoken about today. So does anybody have any question regarding what we've done today so far? So far,
Yes, sir. Is there any similarities between callback function and the return function at all?
return function. It's nothing like a return function. You have
And
a
the return this thing, sorry,
return statement.
yeah, return statement.
There's no difference. There's a difference. The return is basically what you return in a function. Some functions return a value. So return statements are usually found within functions sometimes. Does anybody have any other question?
No, sir, but we need resources after the class.
Okay. So
Sir, please, I want more clarification on something, please.
what is that?
Now, from is it XML HTTP request to the downside to promises? Is it that these are methods on which we can actually get data? This
Yeah.
tree, okay.
So
So even the async await is
yeah.
still a method, okay.
Yeah.
Because I noticed from the beginning it is complex to actually get data, but I noticed that the async await like reduces a lot of stress and still does the same thing.
Yeah. Async await is the most commonly used method of fetching data.
Okay, cool. Thank
But
you.
you can still make use of the .then .catch method. But XML, people don't really use XML because it's long.
Yeah.
So it's better to use the async await.
All right. Thank you.
Does anybody have any other question? So let us try and consume one more API. So we can do that together. So let us look for an API that we can make use of. Yeah. Public APIs. Okay. So let's use Prognosis.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Can you please let's just stop for the day?
We stop for the day.
Yes.
No, we must do. Let's just fetch one more. It's very simple.
Okay.
So for this one, we're not even
Because we still have to go back to it very well and still study a lot.
Sir,
No.
can you please summarize it again instead of doing this?
From beginning.
Yes, sir.
No, I cannot summarize it unless you have question.
Okay.
So I'm going to now show you. I'm going to go through. I'm going to fetch data using Chuck Norris. So this is like a JSON API for jokes, Chuck Norris jokes, right? So we have this. You have this endpoints here, like this. Get Chuck Norris jokes. So if let's copy it. So if you go to our browser normally and you paste it, You see how we get a random Chuck Norris joke. So we see the value Chuck Norris has counted to infinity and negative infinity multiple times while waiting in line at the DMV. So this just gives us a random Chuck Norris joke. So if you refresh it again, you see another one. Bruce the badass bouncer at Planet Nollywood mouthed off to Notorious and now known simply as the guy who bounced off Chuck's fist. So as you generate, it's going to be like random, random. Some of them are not really that funny, but you get the point. So this is how we can get the data. So we have the category, the created at, the icon URL, the ID, the updated at, the URL, and the value. So this is how we can do the. So we're going to have. I think we should use both methods. Let's use the dot then method to fetch, and we'll use the async await method to also fetch too. So we have function fetch Chuck Norris joke promise. So we are going to use the promise method first. So the first thing that we said in the promise method is that we'll use the fetch API. And in the fetch API, we're going to pass in the endpoints that we need, which is this endpoint, right? So we now said that this fetch returns a promise. So we need a way to handle the promise when it comes. That's why we do dot then here like this. Dot then. So dot then has a response. And this response, we are going to pass the response using res.json. This dot then also returns another promise, which we can consume using dot then again, but this one has data. Then here we can just do console.log data.value like this. Or just say data to see how the data comes, right? So we'll just do console.log, or no, we'll just do fetch Chuck Norris joke promise like this. So if we now come to our browser and we refresh, you see that we have our response. We have the we have the value here. In an objective scientific sense, looking at an image of Chuck Norris erodes your soul. So we can do data dot value like this. And in the case that we have errors, we can use dot catch here like this. Then error, then we do CLG error dot message like this. We have CLG error dot message. So this is how we can use the dot then promise method to fetch that particular API, right? So this is it. So I think, is there any other endpoints? So yeah. So this is it. So let us do using the async await. The way we do the async await is that we first start off with an asynchronous function. Async function fetch Chuck Norris joke async like this, right? Then we'll do const response is equal to await fetch like this. You get me? So we are waiting for the response. Then we have a data. So const data is equal to await res dot json like this. Then we do console.log data. right? Then for error handling, the way we do error handling is that we have a try catch block like this. Try, then we have a catch, error, CLG, error. So these are the difference between using the promise method, the fetch and then method against the async await method. So this is it. So as an assignment, I want you guys to look at other APIs. I want you guys to look at other free APIs and make use of those APIs to fetch data and maybe build out a small application, maybe like a weather application using a weather API and so on. So that is it. So does anybody have any question? Jetro, why are you crying? Does anybody have any question?
Sorry, Dax, what's the assignment all about? Sorry.
Just the way we've consumed two APIs. I want you guys to look for other APIs that you can make use of and build a small application from those APIs.
Eh?
It can be a weather application, anything, just simple.
Okay, that's okay, sir.
Yeah, are people afraid?
Oh,
Don't worry, it's something that you guys can do. It's not a big deal.
okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So, does anybody have any other question? So, if there's no other question, this marks the end of today's class. Thank you guys for joining. I hope this class was you were able to like gain a lot. So for those that maybe joined late or could not follow along due to one reason or the other, the recordings are available. So you should try and go through those recordings and fish out some questions so that maybe in the evening session you can ask those questions to the mentor taking that class. So that'll be all for today. Thank you guys. Till next week.
And, okay, okay.
Let me show you.